There's a kind of overwhelm that makes no sense on paper. Your life is not in crisis, nothing catastrophic is happening. By every external measure, today is an ordinary day. And yet, by 2 in the afternoon, you are sitting at your desk, feeling like you've run a marathon you did not sign up for. Your eyes are heavy, but your mind is racing. Your body is tense, but you cannot locate the source of the tension. You're irritable in a way that frightens you slightly, because nothing specific happened to make you irritable. You just feel done, overfull, like a glass that has been filled past its rim and is now trembling at the edge of spilling. You tell yourself you need more sleep, more exercise, more discipline, better nutrition. You cycle through explanations the way you cycle through solutions, and nothing quite fits because the exhaustion keeps returning, regardless of what you change on the surface. And the strangest part, the part you have never quite been able to explain to anyone, is that the most draining days are often the ones where nothing particularly demanding happened. You did not have a difficult conversation. You did not face a major deadline. You simply existed in your life for another ordinary day, and it cost you everything you had. If this is familiar, not occasionally, but as a recurring, bewildering feature of your daily experience, then what you're about to hear may be the explanation you have been missing. Because the things that are draining your nervous system the most are probably not the things you think they are. They are quieter than that, more hidden, more constant. And according to the framework of Dr. Gabor Maté, they have likely been operating beneath your awareness for most of your life. We need to start with a foundational truth about the nervous system that most people are never taught. Your nervous system does not distinguish between a physical threat and an emotional one. It does not know the difference between a predator in the grass and a passive-aggressive comment from a colleague. It does not differentiate between genuine danger and the low-grade, socially invisible stressors of modern life. What it knows, what it has always known, across millions of years of evolution, is activation and deactivation, threat and safety, mobilization and rest. And here's the problem for the modern human nervous system, particularly for the nervous system of someone who grew up in an emotionally unpredictable environment, which according to Mate's research describes the majority of people seeking help for chronic stress and overwhelm. The nervous system of someone who grew up without reliable emotional safety was never given the chance to fully complete the cycle from activation to deactivation. In a household where the emotional temperature was unpredictable, where a child had to remain constantly vigilant, where love was conditional and safety was inconsistent, the child's nervous system learned to stay on, to stay ready, to never fully rest, because rest was not safe when danger could arrive without warning. This child grows into an adult whose baseline is not calm, whose default state is not rest, whose nervous system, even in the absence of any visible threat, is running a background program of low-grade activation that never fully switches off. And into this already sensitized, already overloaded nervous system, 5 hidden stressors pour continuously, day after day, unrecognized and unaddressed. These are not the stressors that show up in wellness articles. They are not too much caffeine or poor sleep hygiene, although those matter. They are deeper than that, more personal, more psychological. And understanding them, genuinely understanding them, not just intellectually, but in the lived experience of your own daily life, is what changes the relationship between you and your nervous system permanently. The first hidden thing, quietly overstimulating your nervous system, is other people's unspoken emotional states. You probably do not realize how much of your daily neurological bandwidth is consumed by this. But think about it honestly. When you walk into a room and someone is in a bad mood they have not named, what happens in your body? When a colleague is tense and pretending not to be, when a partner is withdrawn without explanation, when a family member carries something heavy that they refuse to discuss, where does that unspoken weight land? It lands in you, in your nervous system, in the part of you that was trained from an early age to read the emotional atmosphere of a room with extraordinary precision. From a trauma informed perspective, this is one of the most significant and least discussed sources of nervous system overstimulation for people who grew up in emotionally unpredictable environments. Dr. Gabor Mate's work describes how children who could not rely on their caregivers for emotional safety developed a heightened attunement to the emotional states of others, not as a gift, but as a survival strategy. You learned to sense what others were feeling before they expressed it, because your safety depended on anticipating shifts in the emotional weather before the storm arrived. This capacity did not disappear in adulthood. If anything, it intensified. You became extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional undertones of every interaction, every environment, every relationship. You feel the tension in a meeting that everyone else seems not to notice. You sense the disappointment in a silence. You register the subtle shift in someone's tone that signals something has changed, even when they insist everything is fine. And your nervous system responds to each of these signals as if they are relevant threats, because once upon a time they were. The problem is that you're not just processing your own emotional reality, you are, without choosing to, processing everyone else's as well. You're carrying a neurological load that was never meant to be yours. And it is exhausting in a way that no amount of sleep can touch, because it is not the exhaustion of doing too much, it is the exhaustion of feeling too much, of a nervous system that cannot find a boundary between where you end and where another person begins. Understanding this pattern is the beginning of changing it, not through emotional shutdown or deliberate insensitivity, but through the development of what trauma-informed therapists call differentiation, the ability to notice what you are feeling and ask with genuine curiosity whether this feeling belongs to you or whether you absorbed it from the environment. That question alone, is this mine, can begin to restore a boundary that the nervous system never knew it was allowed to have. The second hidden thing, quietly overstimulating a nervous system, is unfinished emotional cycles stored in the body. Your nervous system is designed to complete emotional experiences, not to suppress them, not to intellectualize them, not to manage them from a safe analytical distance, but to move through them fully, from activation to resolution. This is what animals in the wild do instinctively. A gazelle that survives a predator attack does not ruminate on the encounter. It literally shakes, physically trembling the activation out of its body, and then returns to grazing. The cycle completes. But human beings, particularly those who grew up in environments where emotional expression was unsafe, learn to interrupt this cycle. The anger was swallowed before it could be expressed. The grief was suppressed before it could be cried. The fear was held so tightly in the body that it never had the chance to discharge. The complete emotional experience was truncated at the moment of its inception because completing it was socially, relationally, or physically dangerous. And here is the critical point that Mate's work illuminates so precisely. These interrupted cycles do not disappear. They do not resolve themselves simply because time passes and the original situation is long over. They are stored in the muscles, in the fascia, in the tension patterns of the jaw and the shoulders and the diaphragm, in the chronic tightness that no massage ever fully releases, in the startle response that fires too easily, too intensely in situations that do not warrant it. Every unfinished emotional cycle from your past is contributing right now to the baseline activation level of your nervous system. Every grief that was never allowed to complete itself, every anger that was swallowed rather than expressed, every fear that was held instead of released, they're all still there, still active, still consuming neurological energy, not loudly, but continuously. This is why people who begin genuine trauma-informed therapeutic work often find that the body starts to do strange things. They shake, they cry unexpectedly, they feel heat or tingling in parts of the body they had not been aware of. They have emotional releases that seem disproportionate to whatever triggered them in the present moment. This is not regression, this is completion. The nervous system, given the safety and support it never had before, is finally finishing what it started decades ago. The practical implication of this understanding is profound. It means that healing the nervous system is not primarily a cognitive project. Reading about trauma, understanding its origins, building intellectual frameworks for it, these are valuable, but they're incomplete. The body must also be included. The stored activations must also be moved through, not re traumatized, not forced, but gently, compassionately invited toward completion. And this is where the third hidden stressor arrives, because it is intimately connected to what we have just explored. The third hidden thing, quietly overstimulating your nervous system, is the constant effort of self-suppression. Think about how much energy you spend in any given day managing yourself. Not your workload, not your responsibilities, yourself. The feelings you do not express, the words you edit before they leave your mouth, the needs you silence before anyone can be inconvenienced by them, the reactions you override because they feel too big, too sensitive, too much. This suppression is not incidental. It is a full-time neurological project, and it costs an enormous amount of energy that most people never account for in their understanding of why they are so tired. Gabor Maté's work consistently demonstrates that the suppression of authentic emotional experience is one of the most significant sources of chronic physiological stress available to a human being. He draws a direct line, supported by extensive research, into the connection between psychological experience and physical health, between the habitual suppression of emotion and a range of physical symptoms, including immune dysregulation, chronic pain, hormonal disruption, and inflammatory conditions. This is not metaphor, this is physiology. When the body generates an emotional response and the mind immediately overrides it, the physiological activation that accompanied the emotion does not simply evaporate. The stress hormones that were released do not simply reabsorb because you decided not to feel the feeling. The body still has to process them. And when this happens repeatedly across thousands of suppressed moments over decades of adaptive living, the physiological cost accumulates. You know this suppression intimately, even if you have never named it. It is the moment when something genuinely hurts your feelings, and you immediately manufacture a rational explanation for why it is fine. It is the anger that rises and is instantly converted into excessive politeness. It is the exhaustion you feel after social interactions, not because you are an introvert, but because you spent the entire interaction managing your own experience so that it would not inconvenience anyone else. Every one of those suppressions activates the stress response to some degree. And a nervous system that is constantly activating and suppressing, never gets the chance to complete the cycle and return to genuine rest. The path forward here is not, as it might seem, the wholesale expression of everything you feel to everyone at all times. That would simply replace one problem with another. The path forward is the development of an inner environment in which your emotional experience is first allowed to exist, acknowledged, witnessed, respected, before any decision is made about whether or how to express it externally. The suppression that damages the nervous system is not the management of expression, it is the denial of experience. There's a crucial difference between choosing not to say something and choosing not to feel it. Learning to feel first and manage expression second is one of the most profound acts of nervous system regulation available to you. The fourth hidden thing, quietly overstimulating your nervous system, is the unrelenting vigilance of waiting for things to go wrong. This one is so embedded in daily life that most people do not recognize it as a stressor at all. It simply feels like realism, like responsibility, like being a sensible adult who's appropriately prepared for the unpredictability of life. But beneath the socially acceptable language of preparation and responsibility, there's often something older and more visceral at work. There's the hypervigilance that was installed in childhood, running continuously in the background, scanning the horizon for the threat that logic says is not there, but the nervous system insists is always coming. It shows up in specific ways. You cannot fully enjoy good news because you are already anticipating when it will end. You cannot fully relax in a secure relationship because some part of you is waiting for the person to leave or change or disappoint you. You cannot complete a successful project without immediately moving to what might go wrong with the next one. You cannot sit in genuine contentment without the intrusive whisper that says, "Do not get used to this." From a trauma informed perspective, this is not pessimism, it is prophecy. Specifically, it is the nervous system prophesying the past into the future. In the original environment where the hypervigilance was learned, things did go wrong, regularly, without warning. And the vigilance was adaptive. It helped you prepare, helped you survive, helped you navigate an environment that genuinely required constant readiness. But the vigilance itself is metabolically expensive. It requires the continuous maintenance of a low-grade stress response. It keeps the sympathetic nervous system activated when there is no actual threat to address. It prevents the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest, the calm and connect mode, from ever fully engaging. And a nervous system that cannot access its own rest state is a nervous system that is continuously burning through its own resources. Maté's work points toward what neuroscientists describe as the window of tolerance, the zone in which a person can experience and process emotions without either overwhelming activation or shutdown. People with hypervigilance-based chronic stress often have an extremely narrow window of tolerance. They go from fine to overwhelmed with very little transition. And the narrowness of that window is itself maintained by the chronic low-level activation of the vigilance that never rests. Widening that window is gradual work. It involves first recognizing the vigilance for what it is, not realism, not responsibility, but a loving and outdated protective mechanism that was designed for a specific environment that no longer exists. And second, it involves accumulating evidence, slowly and deliberately, that the present environment is not the past one, that peace is not a trap, that good things do not always end in disaster, that the body is allowed to rest even when the future is uncertain. Because the future is always uncertain, but uncertainty does not require perpetual bracing. And learning the difference between appropriate alertness and chronic hypervigilance is one of the most liberating neurological distinctions a healing person can develop. The fifth hidden thing, quietly overstimulating your nervous system, is the identity you are working so hard to maintain. This is the deepest one, and it is the one that requires the most honesty. You have a self-concept, a story about who you are, what you can handle, what you are worth, how you are supposed to show up in the world. And a significant portion of your daily neurological energy is devoted, without your conscious awareness, to maintaining that story, to confirming it, defending it, performing it consistently across every context and relationship in your life. For many people, that identity is built on the adaptive self that Maté describes, the self that was constructed in childhood to maintain attachment and safety, the strong one, the capable one, the one who does not need much, the one who's always fine, the one who holds things together while quietly, invisibly coming apart. Maintaining this identity requires constant vigilance of a different kind. Every time you feel weak, you have to suppress the feeling so it does not contradict the story of being strong. Every time you need help, you have to override the need so it does not contradict the story of not needing much. Every time the authentic self, with its inconvenient feelings and genuine needs and real limitations, pushes toward the surface, the adaptive identity pushes back. This internal conflict is the source of nervous system overstimulation that is almost never discussed because it is invisible. No one can see it. It produces no external drama. It just runs continuously, relentlessly, consuming energy that should be available for genuine living. According to Maté's framework, one of the most significant sources of chronic stress in adult life is precisely this internal dissonance between the adaptive self and the authentic self. The effort of being someone you are not, or more precisely, of not being someone you are, is physiologically costly in ways that accumulate across decades. The healing is not to suddenly abandon the adaptive identity, which would be both impossible and destabilizing. The healing is to begin gently and courageously to introduce more authenticity into the daily experience of being yourself, to experiment with moments of honesty where performance once lived, to allow need where self-sufficiency once stood, to feel without immediately converting the feeling into something more manageable. Each of these small moments of authenticity reduces the energy cost of self maintenance. Each honest exchange, each genuine expression, each moment in which you let someone see something real instead of something polished. These are moments in which the nervous system does not have to work so hard, in which it can exhale, in which the gap between who you are and who you are pretending to be narrows slightly, and the energy that was consumed by maintaining that gap becomes available for something else, for living rather than performing. Here's what you need to understand about all five of these hidden stressors, about the nervous system that carries them, and about the exhaustion that you have been trying to explain for longer than you should have had to. None of this is your fault. You did not choose a sensitized nervous system. You did not choose the childhood environment that calibrated it. You did not choose to become someone who absorbs other people's emotional states, or who stores unfinished emotional cycles in their body, or who suppresses their authentic experience, or who cannot rest without bracing for what comes next, or who consumes enormous energy maintaining an identity built for survival rather than living. These are not personality flaws. They are not evidence of weakness or fragility or being somehow constitutionally unsuited to the demands of ordinary life. They are the predictable, logical, biologically inevitable consequences of a nervous system that was shaped by an environment that asked too much of it too early with too little support. Maté's work is compassionate and uncompromising on this point. Human beings are not broken by their responses to difficult environments. They are shaped by them. And being shaped is not the same as being damaged, because shapes can change. Nervous systems can learn new patterns. The window of tolerance can widen. The baseline activation level can lower. The body can learn what the mind already knows, that the original threat has passed. But it requires something that the original environment never provided, and that only you can now offer yourself. It requires compassionate attention, not the harsh, demanding attention of the inner critic that says, "Why are you still like this?" It requires the curious, tender attention of someone who genuinely wants to understand what happened and why, and who is willing to sit with that understanding long enough for it to become more than intellectual, for it to become a lived, felt, embodied experience of being finally, genuinely, unconditionally witnessed. That witnessing begins with you. And it begins by understanding, really understanding in the bones, that the exhaustion you feel is not a character flaw. It is the cost of carrying for a very long time, far more than you were ever meant to carry alone. You are not weak, you're overloaded. And there's a profound difference between those two things. If this kind of exploration resonates, if this is the conversation you have needed to have with yourself for a long time, consider subscribing so these reflections can continue to find you when you need them. And before you go, I want to ask you genuinely, which of these five hidden stressors do you recognize most clearly in your own daily life? Which one made something click into place? Leave it in the comments, because naming what has been operating invisibly is the first step in changing its power over you. I will leave you with this. Your nervous system is not your enemy. It is your oldest ally, faithful, intelligent, devoted, doing everything it knows how to do to keep you safe in the conditions it was given. The work of healing is not to fight it. It is to update it, to show it, slowly and with great patience, that the conditions have changed, that safety is possible, that rest is allowed, that the vigilance, the suppression, the hyper-attunement, the relentless self-maintenance, these were always temporary measures. Brilliant, necessary, temporary measures, and temporary things, when the time is right, can finally be put down. That time for you may be closer than you think.